pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Member Angelides?
Here.
Member Hubbard?
Here.
Member Consall?
Here.
Chair Secca?
Here.
We have a quorum.
So, does anybody want to make a, well, first I should ask, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, I just have an announcement.
Okay.
Today is your last meeting.
It is.
Sad.
Sad day.
And so you are, the new member will be Sean Ray.
Okay.
He'll join us next month. So just be aware that next meeting, we're gonna have to, since you're the chair, we're gonna have to elect a chair and vice chair for next meeting. So just be aware of that, and we're gonna miss you.
I'll miss you guys too.
Are you moving off the island?
Going to be yes.
Hope you don't stay away from us.
I'll still be close enough.
Anyways, that's all I wanted to, just thank you for your service.
Thank you. Does anybody want to make a move to approve the agenda?
Yeah, I'll motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Hubbard?
Yes.
Member Consall?
Yes.
Member Angelides?
Yes.
Chair Secca?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Do we have any audience comments on anything that is not on the agenda? Nope, it doesn't look like we do. Okay, we'll move on to approval of minutes. Do we want to do them together or separately? Does anybody have any changes to either of them, or can we do the motion together?
You can.
Okay. Does anybody have any changes to the March 18th or May 20th agenda minutes? I'm sorry, I should say minutes. Okay, somebody want to make a motion to approve the minutes for both meetings?
I'll motion to approve the March 18th and May 20th meeting minutes. Second.
Second, okay.
There was just a couple of punctuation and grammatical errors, but I can show those to the, you can do
Okay.
those.
But there's, so substantive wise,
No.
there's no changes?
No.
Okay, okay. Go ahead and roll call, please.
Member Consall?
Yes.
Member Angelides?
Yes.
Member Hubbard?
Yes.
Chair Secca?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And we will get to discussion items. First one being the coastal resiliency planning.
Take it away, Brandon.
So we have a couple heavier months coming up soon, so we wanted to take an opportunity this meeting to talk about an item that was brought up at the City Commission a few months back dealing with coastal resiliency planning. Keep it at a very high level for now. This is clearly something that we're going to need to be thinking about as we move into the comprehensive plan amendments and other initiatives the city might be undertaking in the near future. And we just wanted to keep it at a high level, talk through some of the existing resiliency efforts that the city's undertaken, and work through a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, just to get your, again, high level ideas how we should move forward. We can pull up the PowerPoint. So I'm sure we all know the definition for resilience, but according to Merriam-Webster, it's an ability to recover from or adjust easily to adversity or change. The U.S. military has a little bit more in-depth explanation, but it's very similar, dealing with pressure, of remaining optimistic and persistent despite setbacks, and being able to recover quickly from them, and being able to anticipate change and learn from mistakes. So again, it's really the ability to predict upcoming changes, upcoming difficulties, and the ability to rebound from them when they occur. Resilience includes several critical components. Some of these are identification of vulnerabilities, strengths, and unmet needs, any kind of future risk reduction that needs to be taken, whether the risks are magnified in the future, whether they're things that may not even exist today that we need to contend with down the line. Any kind of social capital building. A lot of times government is exogenous to the types of capital building that happens in cities, but the ability for residents and the business community and the government to come together and be able to work together on projects and come up with common solutions. And looking for sustainable solutions. How do we use our resources in the most practical manner in ways that'll be sustainable into the future to make sure that they're there for us when we need them. So St. Pete Beach last year published a vulnerability report. It identified critical roadway structures and other city facilities and looked at the future impact of sea level rise in 2040 and 2070 with and without major storm events. And looking at really the flooding potential, some of the other potential of impact on our neighborhoods. There were some short and long-term recommendations that came out of this report. In terms of short-term, the city's consultant recommended inspecting seawalls, installing check valves at outflows, including flood-resistant design standards in the Land Development Code, and utilizing deployable flood barriers and tide gates specifically for critical structures before major events. These are things that could be implemented in a very short period of time. They're not overly costly. They're things that the city can work toward in the near future. There were several long-term recommendations. One was to raise the seawalls. A few years ago, the city set a standard 5-foot NAVD, 5 feet above mean sea level standard for seawalls. Currently, the compliance is required when someone comes in to modify or replace the seawall. The recommendation was to require compliance by a certain date. There was no recommended date. It was just something for the city to consider. Raising roadways above the 100-year 24-hour event, especially critical roadways, evacuation routes. Raising minimum finished floor elevations of new structures. Creating a regional floodwater facility. Implementing living shorelines like we are down in Paso Grill, using natural elements rather than gray infrastructure for repairing seawalls and along the shoreline, and creating a public data portal for community updates.
Hey, Brandon, do you know offhand if the requirement to raise the seawall is specific to replacing the entire seawall or just the cap?
I believe currently it is the entire seawall.
Okay.
I think Mike's here.
Oh, it is the cap. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Misspoke. So Pinellas County produced a vulnerability assessment a number of years ago, and last year they published their own action plan building on that vulnerability assessment. And what it really seeks to do is provide alignment with the county's strategic plan on 4 major goals. Their goals were the natural disaster, climate and sea level rise resiliency, reducing energy use and protecting the natural environment, fostering fairness, engagement, empowerment, seeking sustainable and resilient outcomes through innovation, resource management, and decision-making. So again, more of that social capital building approach, especially on the third item, but there is some alignment here with what the city is seeking through its own vulnerability assessment. And this does give a little bit of a template, some ideas if we were to move forward with an action plan. So looking at some of their goals and policies that stemmed out of those 4 overarching goals would be incorporating cumulative impacts when discussing threats from sea level rise, creating incentives for low impact green building, environmental protection, and hazard mitigation in development and in redevelopment. The city already has a strong green building component in terms of redevelopment. All of our redevelopments do require either LEED certification or another comparable standard. But low impact, working with the natural contours of the site and some of the other elements that come out of that type of development are things that the county is really pushing for. Using land acquisition and vulnerability assessments to preserve land and/or specific natural functions, creating a recreation, open space, and cultural master plan, and encouraging Florida-friendly landscaping and new development, which we do locally as well. We don't currently require it, but many of the recommended species in our land development code, especially for new development, are Florida-friendly. Some others are implementing mitigation that preserves natural functions, again, living shorelines, using oyster boxes and so on, and ones that reduce hazard exposure, managing stormwater, storm surge, and sea level rise to future conditions rather than current conditions, managing development to future climate impacts and stresses, prioritizing infrastructure and resiliency in future vulnerable areas, and supporting healthy communities and restoration of coastal habitat and tree canopies. We do have some recent accomplishments here in St. Pete Beach. Of course, there were the improvements to stormwater infrastructure in Bella Vista, stormwater outfall improvements in Don Cesar Place. City has produced its seawall rehabilitation master plan and phase 2 vulnerability assessment update. And recently, this is something that came to the planning board a few months ago. the city did adopt the required perils of flood statutory requirement in its comprehensive plan, and that has been approved by the state. We wanted to today, again, at a very high level, start this discussion with a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. These are commonly used by businesses and communities as a starting point for identifying existing resources and those that are needed in the future. It's present and future focused. Strengths and weaknesses are generally ones that the community has presently. And opportunities and threats can be both present and future opportunities and threats that are maybe out there that we haven't identified or we haven't taken action on, or those that are potentially opportunities and threats that exist in the future. In today's analysis, we really want to focus on resilience. So again, just giving a little bit more detail about what's involved with this analysis. In terms of strengths, what are the things that we do well, and what resources do we have currently? What are the city's current advantages? And in weaknesses, what could be done better? And going back to resiliency, what efforts have been criticized? What are resiliency efforts that we could maybe have undertaken that we could perform better on in the future? And what vulnerabilities do we currently face? Opportunities, again, are current focused, but they're also future focused. What opportunities are known but not addressed? Are there emerging trends to capitalize on? And are there other local jurisdictions we can align our goals with? Looking back at the Pinellas County resiliency efforts, they already have a plan. There might be opportunities for us to either align goals or align on funding opportunities moving forward. And what threats are there? Could there be existing weaknesses that are more significant in the future? Could they result in greater vulnerabilities? Are there external roadblocks to blocking progress? And are there significant changes, either economic, environmental, social, or otherwise, coming that could affect our future? So with that, I don't think we want to really give a guided discussion to this. I think we just really wanted to get your general input under these 4 categories, looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, some of the opportunities and threats that may face us today or in the future, especially in terms of resiliency. What does the board see that we should be focusing on at a high level moving forward with this effort?
Yeah, our goal is to start here. This is kind of the commission direction, was to come to you all first. Potentially maybe putting together a committee of people outside of this board that have some experience in their professional levels that could contribute to that. But then also having more community meetings, whether it be with residents, with businesses, the commission again, and then have a scope of work that we can then take and put out to bid. So then we have a firm that will go and really do a master plan for us that has dollar amounts. So that way we can forecast moving forward. So this is kind of the first step. We, like Brandon said, we have done a lot of studies. We have done the threats for our community, and Mike could speak to that, some of the things that we've done for that. We just now need to get to the point where we can prioritize, move forward, and really start formulating a scope of work that we can get there. So that's why we're talking about it today. So we want to get your all input. It won't be the only time that we'll have input for you, but this just kind of starts it off for us. So that's generally the guidance we were given to start with this. So,
and if I may, Chair Secca, for a minute, just to piggyback. Thank you, Jennifer. Great update. So, resiliency is kind of a very broad umbrella. There may be things like raising seawalls. I know the Don Cesar boat ramp has been a hot topic. So what the commission really decided was there was talks about a resiliency group, and they were like, well, planning board, that's what they do, is they plan. So this is kind of the first step to this bigger, broader discussion where I see potentially a plan put in place realistically over 10 years in separate phases that addresses certain things every phase that will be approved by the commission. So I just kind of want to set the stage with that high level overview of what we're trying to do, and this is just a very beginning piece of that broader puzzle.
So I have a question. Part of the supporting documentation that was shared with us was obviously the reports and that, was it Kimley Horn, is that who did it? I forget who
Horn,
all of
yeah.
that was from.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one of my questions was, I saw that they gathered a lot of data. All of that was prior to the 2 events last year. Have they gone back and reevaluated any of the data after the 2 events last year to see if there's changes as far as focus areas or anything like that? Or is that something
I'm
that
not
you
sure
guys
offhand.
consider? I guess that's more of what my question is, you know, if it doesn't, because it looked like it was earlier in 2023, so it's just something that I was thinking about, that it seemed like it would make sense for us to look at what happened with those 2 events and, you know, and what all was impacted from those 2 events that might be different from what's already been gathered, you know, prior to that.
Yeah, I'd have that interest as well, because last year, in both occurrences, I had water over my seawall for the first time, and so obviously they were more extreme than the past 10 years have been in my house. So that would be of interest to me.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious on that.
Hi, everybody. Mike Clark, Public Works Director. Most of the data is hard data. It's an elevation, it's a location in space, and it exists in our infrastructure. Our infrastructure has not moved. The roads haven't changed, elevations, the points in space have not changed. What has changed is how Mother Nature approaches us with the water. And so the elevations of the water change with each dynamic storm, and they impact the existing infrastructure in more dramatic ways. And so I think that's what we're seeing. So the data that we have, I really don't know if it would be worth the cost or the time or the effort to update the data, maybe a few specific points. But by and large, we know which intersection and what location is going to be flooded at what depth and what storm profile, a number of different storm profiles, the 25-year storm, the 100-year storm are the 2 typical ones. And so we already know which intersection is going to be at how many inches deep in water under what type of storm profile.
Okay. So you're saying that there's, and I get what you're saying from part of it, but I guess one of the things that I'm just kind of curious about also is obviously with part of the northern part of the beach, there was undergrounding. I know that in looking at the stormwater system, it looks like that's something that we've really got to address. I know that doesn't impact what's coming in, but when you've got what's coming down on top of that, you know, weather-wise, you know, that's one of the areas that I'm just kind of curious on, you know, is whether or not, I mean, maybe that's affecting it as opposed to, you know, the other data that you're talking about. I guess I was just looking at, because part of what it looked at is, you know, the number of properties that flooded and different things like that. So that was the main reason why I was mentioning that, and curious as to whether or not it was looking at those, because I think it was like 1,500 or 1,537 or some, I don't remember the exact number of properties that it indicated had flooded more than once in that documentation. And so that's why I was just curious is, with those events having happened last year, was there any change to what those numbers were? Were there any new, you know, things that ended up, would be going onto that list, I guess, is part of what I'm curious about.
Again, I think that the storm profile, the amount of water, the depth of water that the storm brings to the existing infrastructure that hasn't changed in its elevations is where you're seeing the changes in the numbers. And so we are seeing, in the last 2 events, more of District 1's surface land area being inundated to depths of 6 inches or less. And it has caught our attention, and it was not unexpected. Down in District 4 in Pass-a-Grille, the same thing has happened, only deeper. In the Don Cesar neighborhood, same thing, only deeper. Bella Vista, same thing, only deeper. Gulf Boulevard has improved its drainage primarily due to the fact that the FDOT cleaned their stormwater outfall structures, which was a significant help. As you recall, in parts of Gulf Boulevard, all 5 lanes were covered and people stalling out on the outside lanes. So I think the data of repetitive loss, so to speak, is extremely valuable. It gives us the topographic boundaries of the area, the neighborhood that we need to be looking at, and how does that footprint that was inundated how do we go about creating infrastructure that would prevent that from happening? And so that's where we're currently at in Public Works, is right on the edge of bringing forward those design projects for the next round of consideration.
Do you know if during last year's events there are locations that had floodwaters that have received the resiliency improvements that then performed properly as expected? So, for example, Paso Grill power line undergrounding, were any of those areas underwater and power remained on, so we know it actually accomplished its goal?
I guess I'd go ahead and say that we have two general types of events that take place. One event is a storm level that does not increase the bay to the height where it overtops seawalls. And so we're dealing with an inland rainwater drainage situation. And the other one is where the seawalls are overtopped by a bay water event, regardless of whether or not it's raining. And then so you have a different type of flooding event there. The water will seek its level, so when it comes up over the walls, it's going to come level everywhere. Rainwater drains and flows, and where it ponds, it'll begin to seek a level, but not the same level as the seawalls. The answer to your question about failing infrastructure is yes. The tide check valves that we held high hopes for are intermittent in their effectiveness. If the tide check valves are subject to being held open by debris, and in that case, if the bay water is rising, it's coming through the tide check valve, and if the rainwater is falling, it's colliding with the incoming water, and it's ineffective. We now have in design 2 preventative measures that we are going to be implementing to the existing check valves that we have put in. And we have the second experimental is for a stormwater inlet that will be reconfigured, not necessarily dependent completely upon a check valve, but we will chimney the stormwater inlet. And the check valve, a duckbill check valve, will close off the water from going up into the road. But in order to relieve pressure from building up in the pipe and potentially overcoming the structural integrity, we're going to have a chimney that will allow the water to rise and fall, much like you have in your house, to prevent water hammer effects in your plumbing system.
Okay.
We are sharing those thoughts with others in the public works community around the region, St. Petersburg and all the other public works directors in the county. And so we think we're on the right track. You know, it's a learning experience. You know, folks that were in our positions 30 years ago, they weren't learning about sea level rise.
Yeah.
We now are. And so we're seeing innovative thoughts. We're seeing more innovative structures. We're seeing more intricately designed projects coming forward on all aspects, Tampa Bay region on down, through the county, through St. Petersburg to us.
Okay.
I mean,
That was a very long-winded answer to.
Yeah, no problem. Quite a few of the items on Kimley Horn's vulnerability assessment are showing a color coding which suggests they're not budgeted for or need to be budgeted for. Do you have a feel for, I guess that's a question for the commission, right? If they're going to assign money towards these items and when, and is that along the lines of something they need to decide on to make that happen?
Well, they do hold the purse strings, but in general, philosophically, at a high level, the city budget is balanced. We are providing levels of service across all of our departments that meet most of the expectations of our community. And that consumes 100% of the existing budget as they're drawn up year to year to year. We now have this new existential threat called sea level rise, or whatever we want to call it, and it's going to add projects to the list. And so if we're going to take an entirely new category of very expensive projects to prevent flooding, and we're going to place that inside the existing budget, What part of the budget do we give up? Which levels of service are we going to discontinue in order to make room for this new funding requirement? Or are we going to place that funding requirement on top of the existing budget and come up with a new dynamic of funds in order to accommodate the need for the design and the construction? Between now and the year 2075, 2080, the year 2100, my off-the-cuff guesstimate is we are around $100 million in requirements.
Mike, isn't the reality that in order to provide the level of service that the residents have come to expect and add on these projects, that the monies have to come from the taxpayer, grant, city, county, state, and federal grants? So some combination of the millage rate increasing a small amount in order to pay for these additional resiliency programs, and which the counties, state, and federal grants do not cover. Because, as you said, that $100 million may or may not be funded 100% from a federal, state, or county level, so it will fall to our residents to pay some small portion of that.
But I think part of the projects are also going to help to pay for that, and they're also putting in resiliency efforts into their projects as well. So it's not just going to be getting shouldered by the residents.
Oh, no, that's what I,
Okay.
no, I agree.
Okay,
I'm
so
not,
like-
no, I don't mean, no, I said small, meaning very, but there may conceivably be some small amount, very minor, but some small amount that we may need to do that as part of, because as you said, you're 100% budgeted for your revenues, and what we can't get in grants or state and federal monies, much like the beach renourishment from the county, but we got that from the bed tax, but somewhere a small emphasis on minute amount may have to come from the raising of the millage rate or in a special assessment or whatever. I'm not putting you on the hook because you're Public Works and not the City Commission, which has the budgeting problem, but because I do see, like David, I saw the amount that wasn't 100% funded in the Kimley Horn projects, and they seem to be the actual capital projects, not the paperwork projects or task.
I
Make a comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
This is Tom Gambert.
Oh.
And I'm in this via Zoom, so I appreciate you allowing me to still be part of this. Mike, how long have we been putting these check valves in place that are now determined to be, I don't want to use the current term inadequate because I don't think that's it, but their operation is somewhat flawed? How long have we been putting these in, and to what previous studies have we done to try to correct this, or are we just now trying to correct these valves that are not operating appropriately?
We put in the first round of check valves with the Paso Grill Road Rehabilitation Project, and that was a 2016, 17, 18 two-phase program. Those tied check valves, for the most part, have functioned properly over time, and so we did not have any concerns in 2019, 20, and 21. And at that time, our observations in the Don Cesar and Bella Vista neighborhoods were that these tied check valves may well do nicely for us because they performed well in Paso Grill. We didn't realize that the challenges that we would have with marine growth and debris matter and putting those in the outfall structures. And so that was a learning moment for Public Works. And we were learning that same thing along with all of the other cities that were doing pretty much the same thing at the same time. And so we have spent the last about 7 or 8 months thinking our way through how do we mitigate the reasons why these tide check valves fail. And so we believe that we have a very good way forward in mitigating the tide check valves as they sit and being able to reposition them and protect them so that they're not on the outfall structure itself but back further into the street system. And there is a project that has been approved for construction and another project we're bringing forward for design to do that in the Don Cesar and Bella Vista neighborhoods. So moving forward, we'll do well by observing the performance of the rehabilitated projects for a period of time and continue to think our way through where next in the city we need to be going and whether or not that is actually the way the design that we need to be using.
And I have one other question to, and I appreciate that. You defined District 1 as a new or a recent element of concern based on the amount of flooding that we observed in the last 2 storms. And District 1 has, I'm not sure how many check valves to it, but is there a process up to identify those intersections that your department is focusing on flooding so that our residents can see these are the intersections that we notice, and if our residents have other concerns that are not listed in your intersections of concern that they can comment to?
There are no check valves in District 1 that I'm aware of. And it was the last 2 storms where I had personally had the opportunity to see the incursion of the water as it was marked on people's garage doors and up in the yards where the debris line is. I had heard from residents in previous years, 2000, 2001, that there has been flooding and it's getting worse and they're more concerned, especially on 76th, 77th Avenue. 78th, yes. And so I have been looking at that area now for quite a number of years, waiting for the right opportunity, the right time to bring forward a concept or a design or some sort of project that we might be able to use to protect those neighborhoods. And through the vulnerability study, what you see in there, we have 175 watersheds identified in the city. In previous studies, we focused on the top 25 watersheds that had the most number of issues identified, and those are where the big projects that we have identified in the last 5 years have come from. In moving forward, it's not just those 25 watersheds. So for example, let's take Bogus Ciega Drive from 87th Avenue right down here to 75th Avenue. We have a project on the books now to resurface that road. The commission sent us back into design because of the configuration between bicycle lanes and driving lanes, and we're doing that. But as a result of these last 2 storms, our engineering department, myself and our city engineer, Camden Mills, we are implementing a sustainability review aspect to all of our projects, and for any project you can possibly think of. And we take a look at that project and say, well, if we're going to invest $3 to $5 million into resurfacing this road and redoing the stormwater, what are we doing as far as resiliency is concerned, because this road floods? And so we need to go back and ask that question. as we ask that question, the answer, I believe, partially lies in the reconfiguration of the internal drainage under the street system, connecting the individual stormwater basins and directing that flow to outfall structures that contain pump systems and tide check valves, or pump systems, that will direct that flow and protect the bay water, prevent the bay water from coming into the system. And so we have it on Bogosiega. We have two locations. One is the park at 80th Avenue, I believe, Jennifer? The park at 80th Avenue. And then farther south, we have the retention ponds area by the recreation center. And so we take the 3 or 4 watersheds that span across that project, and we interconnect them and direct all that drainage water to 2 locations where we can evacuate it. The conversation also needs to include the private component part of our residents and their seawalls. On the other side, on the west side, between 76 and about 80th, 83rd or so, all the way up to Old Gulf Boulevard, that block section in there, that is another area that has recently flooded. A lot of properties were receiving 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 inches of inundation. And that is another area where we have about a half a dozen individual watersheds that we can interconnect underneath the street system and direct to outfall pump structures at 2 of our park locations. But again, we'll have that conversation with all of the private residences and their seawalls. So that's the general idea about where we're moving forward in public works as to what the future of the city looks like. We are actually in design right now with the first example, which is in Bella Vista at the 45th and Lido intersection area. There's a long block section there that floods pretty deep, knee deep. And we are in design now at about halfway through with a pump station that would be in that neighborhood, and the outfall structure would be at the Bogosiega Isle Bridge. And so we would protect that neighborhood that way. So there's an awful lot of thought going on in that kind of direction as to where we're headed.
I have another question. So, and I don't know if this is something that's even possible. I know, like, obviously with sewers, they can go and do scopes and see on the sewer system how all that's operating and whether or not things are functioning, you know, or if there's cracks or different things like you know, that we found with the sewer system. Is there something like that also for the stormwater system, for us to go in and have somebody go in and kind of scope it out and take a look and see, like, is there debris in there? Is there different issues like that that would be something that would be easier? I'm guessing easier. I shouldn't say that. But we would know then, hey, you know, this is where it might be failing, or it may have, you know, disintegrated or whatever. Again, I don't know what the underground stuff looks like, so I'm just asking a question from, you know, just kind of comparing it to something else where I know that you have the opportunity to kind of scope and see how things look.
No, great question. And it is a industry standard that every city municipality should go inside their pipes with a cleaning and then a televising inspection about once every 6 years or so.
Okay.
And both for the stormwater system and the sanitary system. A lot of folks don't realize that a sanitary system has a lot of debris in it. It's not all water, and it doesn't all flow. It collects at the bottom of the pipe. When we had the moratorium on new growth in the city, because our SSOs are out of control on Gulf Boulevard, we cleaned that main pipe. It was between 50 and 65, 70% blocked with debris. Only 15 to 20% of that pipe was usable for our wastewater flows, and that's why we're seeing sanitary sewer overflows. The stormwater system, while not as much subject to that kind of debris, because the pipe runs are usually much shorter and clean themselves out under heavy flow, we do need to take a look at those pipes every so often, every 6 years or so. That is a large undertaking for our city. We can split that into districts and kind of ease the burden. But as it stands right now, that program we have not executed well in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So
that's-
we don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm just gathering.
We have all the previous data.
Right.
And so the technology has improved considerably. So when we send a camera through the pipe, it is measured and tracked by the inch, and the deficits in the pipe are noted and photographed. And so we have an extraordinary file of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs of what we call point repairs, which is a pipe failure at a certain spot, and inundation and infiltration, which is cracks and separations of the pipe that allow the groundwater and the floodwaters to enter the system. And so we have a great source of data on where we need to be focused, but it's 6 years out of date.
So just out of curiosity with, and I don't know when we started doing undergrounding, but I guess one of the things I'm curious about is, with the place where, like, did we have undergrounding anywhere six years ago? Not counting the Passive Grove project.
Very few projects were electrical systems and communication systems were undergrounded systematically. Passive was pretty much the first big effort.
Okay.
Three
Gulf
Palms
Boulevard.
Point, Three Palms Point is underground. 2/3 of Three Palms Point neighborhood is underground.
Is that new or is that older?
Oh, it's been underground since we bought the home in 1985.
Okay, so it's older then.
And when you
Yeah.
drive up, First Palm Point is not.
Mhm.
Commissioner Grill's, one street of Second Palm Point was not.
Got it.
And then the last 2.5 streets are underground, and they have been for
a
40
long time.
years.
So I'm not
So, 'cause
sure.
part of- yeah, 'cause-
Let me follow up
Go
on
ahead,
that real
okay.
quick. I'm not sure when or why or how that happened, but it is there, and it's good. Commissioner Grill did ask Duke Energy for a cost estimate to underground other portions of that area. And we have had at least 2 neighbor groups that have asked Duke Energy to underground their areas.
And Gulfway Gulfway, I believe is, or
Gulfway is.
Gulf Winds, I'm sorry, Gulf Winds.
Gulf Winds is another area, but Duke Energy is doing that on their own. But
Right.
back to the first point, the average neighborhood, Palms Point, we're looking at about a $20,000 to $22,000, $25,000 per household cost to go ahead and electively underground projects without any government assistance. And so I think that's where that conversation ended. Gulf Winds Drive is the second road that we have for serious rehabilitation.
Right.
Duke Energy across the state has been directed by the state to go ahead and harden its energy distribution system. And they can do that in 2 ways. They can harden the above ground, like we see over here with these poles by the church, or they can underground. It's up to them which way they want to go based on cost analysis, and there's formulas that they have to follow. Interestingly enough, Gulf Winds Drive was an underground option that Duke Energy is doing on their own without city funding. There are many areas in District 1 and 2 throughout this area here that we have seen in the last year and a half, a lot of Duke Energy, a lot of Spectrum, and a lot of other vehicles undergrounding. Part of that was due to the commission's asking Public Works if we would reach out to Duke Energy and cost share with them. So we selected as much as we could to cost share, and Duke Energy agreed to put underground a number of the wires in some of the neighborhoods, but we were not able to sustain that effort due to funding restraints.
Question on that, is there, and again, just thinking through this and looking at different things, with that undergrounding, I know that it did affect some of the other items, like, all of a sudden people were having water lines that were breaking, that were actually at the street level, that weren't, personal residents, but out farther. And even with reclaimed, is there any possibility that any of that could have affected what was getting into our stormwater drainage systems or anything like that? I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious, after all of that was done, whether or not we have given any thought to that, or if there is a potential that that could have impacted or affected any of it.
The general answer is yes, there were impacts, many impacts, I'd say greater than 35, 40 that I can top off the top of my head. So when the contractors are out there and they're drilling new conduit in the ground, there's a lot of utilities out there that they got to stay away from. There's vertical and horizontal separation requirements between utilities, and you have to kind of thread the needle. Well, we don't know exactly where everything is, and every once in a while we get astray, and they'll push a conduit right through a pipe. So if the pipe is pressurized, that's the drinking water system and the reclaimed irrigation system, we know it right away. There it is.
Right.
If the pipe is not pressurized, i.e. our gravity sewer, sanitary sewer main, and our gravity stormwater main, we might not know about that strike for quite some time, 6, 8 months. And some of those strikes are quite deep. If you recall the difficulties we had at 65th Avenue with a very deep detour a while back that was very disruptive to traffic. That was 12 feet down, and we didn't find out about that for, we don't even know how long. It could have been going on for years. And in the sanitary sewer system, when you have that kind of break, there's dirt and debris that's flowing into that pipe, and it settles in the pipe. And that's why, again, we have to advocate for cleaning and televising these pipes on a routine basis. And building the bus stop right out here on 75th Avenue, the contractor drilled a package of 6 4-inch conduits through our sanitary sewer pipe. Took the top 1/3 of the pipe right off. And the way we found out about that was the road collapsed in about 2 or 3 weeks. And it took us about 4 or 5 months to fix that project. So we might know about all this. We might not know about all of the other breaks or drill hits for the rest of this year.
Gotcha.
Eventually, we'll figure it out.
For me, that's been very helpful. I don't know if everybody else has more questions or if we want to start to get into the SWOT analysis, because after hearing more of that, kind of, I think, identifies different parts for the SWOT analysis. But if other people still have more questions, by all means.
I have one more question, if I could, for Mike. Mike, you've been very explicit about all of the studies and the problem areas and defining, and obviously your department has been very good at defining those problem areas and studying them. And I recognize completely your budgetary constraints, but this is something that are we getting into analysis paralysis on this? And we've got areas that while our undergrounding of electricity is very important to the city, if we lose power, we lose our refrigeration and the inconvenience to people. If we flood, we evacuate the island, and they may not come back for a long time. Are we prioritizing these? Are we bringing forward to the commission, hey, we've got serious things, we know what to do, we need the funds now to fix it?
As we have built the budget, every fiscal year, the city managers have asked us those questions. You know, what do we need to be doing? And we're very frank about all of this and the costs and where we think we can go with it and what we ought to be doing. And then we take a look at the budget numbers, and we have been budgeting to continue appropriate levels of service for normal daily activities. And we have found recently a sizable amount of money, $750,000 for the Don Cesar neighborhood. And we have found enough money in the enterprise funds, stormwater and wastewater, to do a number of projects, and very expensive ones. We've accomplished, it's actually rather impressive, the number of projects that we have accomplished. If you remember Blind Pass Road, when we resurfaced that, there are 2 60-inch diameter stormwater pipes underneath that street. So that was an enormous stormwater management project that most folks don't even realize is there. So there's certainly more left to do than our current budget process will allow us. Back to Member Consol's comments about other people's money. We like OPM. We're currently managing 6 grants in the stormwater protection arena. And the grant portal for Resilient Florida just opened up, and city engineer and I will be studying that for opportunities. So we're no stranger to going after other people's money. And 6 grants at once, we're not bad. It's the very first time in my career that I've actually had a grant for a design of a project and the construction also. Some grants are 50-50. Some grants are 100%. The Florida boating grant for the Don Cesar boat ramp was 100%. Others are not. There's, in a lot of the federal grant language, there's language in there that heavily favors disadvantaged neighborhoods and things of that nature, which effectively places St. Pete Beach out of the running completely. Don't even think about it. I mean, don't waste your time writing a grant that's specifically designed for minority disadvantaged neighborhoods. Not going to happen. Other grants are not so restrictive, and so we've got to keep our eyes open. Tom, did that answer your question?
No, it does, but it still begs the question, and for District 1, you have stated that there is not one check valve located in District 1, that the resiliency for District 1, while we're focusing on Don Cesar and Paso Grill and the other districts, I think our residents of District 1 need to have some real concerns about this year, next year, because your planning cycle and the funding cycle is, if I'm not mistaken, 3 to 5 years out for design, budgeting, building, getting your contracts out, and then actually doing the work. What do you say to the residents of District 1 when we state we don't have one check valve?
I think overall, as we take a look across the city, we have focused on the basins, the watershed basins that have been identified in the vulnerability reports as being the worst first. That doesn't mean that when you're getting flooded that's not important. But when you have to prioritize, you prioritize against the are you going 3 feet under, or are you going 6 inches under? And so we also have the considerations of maintaining trafficability on the streets and just the enormous damage that's being done. So it's not that we have a lack of awareness that we should be doing check valves and other mitigation efforts in other parts of the city, including District 1. It's that in a prioritization environment, somebody's first and somebody's second.
I got you. And District 1 is where we have been, so thank you.
Mike, with that flooding in District 1, did it occur because of the stormwater, the water in the streets that just couldn't drain off, or did it occur because of a bay tidal event that the water came in from over the seawalls, or both? I don't live in District 1 and we evacuated, so that's why I'm asking the question. It was.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's both. But when that happens, it's not any one particular district. It's the entire island is experiencing the same stress at the same time, and that's when the topography of the island has its effect. Some places are more elevated than others. Even a couple of inches matters. The Don Cesar neighborhood is very low-lying, as is portions of Bella Vista, much more so than any place else on the island. And inches matter. So District 1 is a little bit higher overall than some of these other neighborhoods.
So that it's just a matter of when those, the city, the storm drainage is the same throughout, but District 1 doesn't have check valves where the other districts do, and maybe that could be one of the priorities, that you do install the check valves in District 1 if all the other districts have them, as well as look at other resiliency and storm mitigation projects?
Given the effect of the last couple of storms, I think it's definitely worthwhile to take a look at District 1 with an eye towards a tidal check valve program that would precede a larger pump station interconnection of watersheds program.
Would not Blind Pass, that project that, not Blind Pass, Boca Ciega project, when they do that improvement in Boca Ciega, would that not help alleviate that?
It was not designed to, because we were not having this type of conversation when that design began.
But your new design, that you're looking
Yes,
at.
in our current environment of consideration, the Boca Ciega project absolutely should contain flood protection measures.
Should or does?
Should.
So
I noticed the choice of words.
I have been taking notes, so I'm gonna just kind of read what I've written down as strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Okay.
I'm going to
So
go
I
over.
feel
we
like,
add two of
as
them?
we've been talking, I've been writing them down, and then we can have a conversation of if I missed something or if I placed it probably in the wrong one. So, strengths. We have some. Repetitive data, so these studies give us some solid data on structure. Undergrounding that we've done in Pass-a-Grille and Gulf Boulevard. Putting resiliency in existing projects, which I think Mike was referring to. But there's also opportunities there too. Identifying watersheds, we have done that. We have the ability to go in and clean and televise the pipes, but on the same token, we have a weakness there because we haven't done it in 6 years, so I wrote it in 2 places. And we have done quite a bit on studies that Mike and his team have done over the last 5 years. For weaknesses, I wrote down stormwater, tide check valves in some locations, the
Get
6
funding
years
on
out
that
of
one?
date. What's
Get
that?
funding on that side under weaknesses?
Utility breaks is a weakness. We don't know where all of those utilities are, and we discussed that a little bit. And then District 1 and having a plan for District 1. For opportunities, I also see District 1 as an opportunity. Tide check valve maintenance and protection is an opportunity. I put Southwest Inlet. Did you bring that up, Mike? I don't know what that is. Innovation, we were talking about all the technology that's coming out, so I think there might be opportunity in just kind of how we handle some of these things moving forward. Grant funding, as Mike has said, we've got a handful of them existing, but there are a lot of opportunities out there. An opportunity at possibly looking at the millage rate, if depending on how it's prioritized, where the money comes, that's an opportunity. Special assessment is also an opportunity. Intersections identified, I think that is a strength, but I think is an opportunity to keep an eye on that and keep updating that. I know one of the last storms, we had a guy kayaking down Boca Ciega Drive right in front of the community center, so it's getting worse, yes. Mike talked about connecting watersheds underneath as we do project, and then undergrounding in the neighborhoods. I wrote as an opportunity, prioritizing as an opportunity, and looking at the Boca Ciega project. And then for threats, money, budget, sea level rise, change in level of service, might be a balancing act. Blocked pipes, storm, sewer, et cetera. So getting, I think that, as Mike explained, once it gets backed up, it's a threat to the system. And utilities underground, kind of as we were talking, is a threat too, just because as it was explained, sometimes it takes months before we realize they hit anything underneath there. So Did I miss something?
So there's some that we didn't talk about that are just kind of floating in my mind, and they might not make any sense.
Okay.
So,
Let's go. Add to
so I know one of the things we've talked about before is obviously when with residential properties, there is a lot of older properties that are like the pervious surface is little to none. I still think that's something that we need to be considering because, again, that's going to help with the issue. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that's still something that we need to be moving more toward. I know that we have always been a little apprehensive about that because obviously that's getting into, funds that somebody may have to spend. So, we need to look at how we balance that out, whether or not there's grants or different things that can help with somebody, that might be on a fixed income that can't necessarily do it. And also looking at, just other ways that we can possibly implement that and start getting more focused on that. I know we've talked about it before as well, and I know even the city still uses it. I know for sure, down in Paso Grove, but I know we've talked before about shell and crushed shell and just different things that can get into the stormwater system that can block it, that can create issues. I think we need to start addressing more of that as well. I mean, it might be fine if you've got shell in your backyard, but maybe that's not what you want to have in your front yard and anything that's near, any kind of storm drainage. Those are things that didn't come up in today's discussion, but have been sitting in the back of my mind for knowing this conversation was going to be coming up. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or comments on
That also
that.
brings up the point of residential seawall height. I know there's some kind of plan in place for that, right? Certain requirements for goals for future seawall height at every property.
Yes.
And then, of course, ground level height on every house. I know there's already existing legislation on,
So an opportunity
building.
for seawall heights?
yeah,
Is that what I'm hearing?
and just elevating all facets of residential homes, I would say.
So you had mentioned one of the strengths being watershed identification. Can you elaborate on what that means, what we've done?
I think, Mike, if I heard you right, he's been able to identify those watersheds,
Yeah, they're in there.
and the opportunity was to connect them, correct?
I think the beauty in the data of knowing where your watersheds are is that we know exactly what the acreage of that watershed is. And so we also know exactly, the best science we have. So let's talk about a 25-year rain event. It's expected to drop a certain number of inches per water in that 24-hour period. And a watershed of 5 acres or 1 acre, or 8.23 acres, it's very, very accurate. Also has a component to it of permeability. And so if you're a completely, an area like the stretch of land down by the Zamora, okay, there's nothing on it, and that water is going to permeate straight on through. If you're in an area of neighbors that all have asphalted their front yards, then all that water is cascading into the street. And so a combination of data that we already have about the watershed size, how much water will flow into that watershed on a 24-hour period, and its general permeability condition index tells us what the flooding situation will be at certain street intersections. And then we have that depth of in inches from 3 to 13 to 18 inches. So we have an advantage there.
So the reason I'm curious about this is, do we know if our stormwater outfalls are where we want them or where they should be per watershed? And the reason I'm curious about this is when I moved in, or when I moved here in 2013, our house had, once the prior house had been removed, we discovered there was an unknown outfall below where we wanted the new house to be. The city didn't know it was there. It never had an easement, and it had collapsed probably decades prior. So our area of the street never drained properly, and because the house was gone at that point, I came to commission meetings and kind of nagged at the commission, hey, there's no house here right now. It's a great time to install an outflow through our seawall if you'd like to put one in our setback area, and I'm happy to give you an easement in return. And fortunately, that commission was amenable to doing that, and there was funds to make it happen. So within months, the city's like, yeah, that's a great idea. There's no house there. We can run a pipe right through there, solve the problem. And the where I'm at in my neighborhood drains dramatically better now. So that made me wonder if we have support in our comp plan for when a house is gone, if the city should have an opportunity to put a new outfall in there, and if the city's ever studied that, so we know where we would really like them when the opportunity presents, if it comes up suddenly. So that's where I was going with that.
I would see that as an opportunity.
Okay.
That we could incorporate a process whereby that takes place.
Okay.
I am not surprised at that story. There's a lot of infrastructure in the city that it's a real head scratcher sometimes. How did that happen? And so you dig back into our history to the 1900s and coming forward, and all of the different things that have taken place over time, the attitudes over time. I'm not surprised. We're still finding sanitary sewer vaults, under people's driveways.
Yeah.
But I think that's an opportunity.
Okay. Kind of a side question on that. At least in my neighborhood, that new outfall was plumbed to 4 separate storm drains, kind of scattered about across my immediate neighbors in front of their homes. And during that last storm event, we were under mandatory evacuation. I chose not to. And all 4 drains that tied into that outfall were covered in debris, of course. So I noticed that the water levels were getting up to my neighbors' front doors. My home, having been constructed more recently, was elevated higher, so it was halfway up our driveway, not a huge deal. But just by going out there with a rake and getting the debris off the top of those 4 drains, the water was from front door back into the street and gone in like 5 minutes. So, the city staff probably can't be here during an evacuation, but I'm just wondering if there's been any studies of ways to keep debris from causing that. I don't know if it means installing more and more storm drains tied into the same outfalls, if that, just multiplying the number of them helps with that, or it seems like an easy fix when they're being configured. I don't know, but I don't know that.
The flow dynamics are precise, and so the number of inlets on the street that service to a single pipe are all sized to the pipe diameter. So we would expect to see in a 25-year storm event some amount of rainwater to be able to evacuate in a certain amount of time through a group of inlets that flow into a pipe. And so the diameters of all of those systems are all calculated and constructed for that design parameter. And so if we were to increase the number of inlets to an existing pipe more than it could handle in its safety factor, you can always put 1 in. We can always take 1. It probably can't take 3 or 4.
Okay.
And so we would also, I would offer an opportunity parallel to the properties that lose a house. We would have an opportunity to go back and reflect on the outfall systems. We could do just a quick check. It wouldn't take long to see whether or not we have the opportunity to maybe increase the number of inlets in a certain area that would drain the water faster.
Okay.
I don't know that if that's possible or not, but it's an opportunity to study.
Okay.
Can I just go on from something that you mentioned there? So just out of curiosity, I don't know if it's something that we already do or not, but if we know that there's a big event coming, do we have enough people on your staff, I guess it would probably be, Public Works, to go out and make sure that all the debris is cleared out of, where all those drains are and things like that? Because if we aren't, I'm just curious whether or not we've got the ability to go and make sure that it's a clean slate that we're going to be dealing with as the storm comes in. I don't know if that's something you guys already do, so don't be offended that I'm asking the question. I don't know. It's just something that I thought of based off of what he was talking about. It's like, okay, let's do a little preemptive strike here before anything even shows up and get all this cleaned up and out. So
I am asked that question more often than you might think, and it's not a bad question. It's a good question. And the answer is we have 2 stormwater personnel on staff. We have several hundred outfall structures. We have
Staffing might-
2 days to get our tails off the city. So
Yeah.
the answer is no. We're not going to go out and clean stormwater grates.
So
We do
maybe
have a
some-
stormwater volunteer program that you
Yes,
can
we
sign
do.
up for, and we will give you the
Protected grant.
equipment.
Yeah, the adopt-a-drain, yeah.
Adopt a
Betty
drain
knows,
program
because
we
Betty
have.
cleans it for
Yeah.
her neighborhood.
And we have a lot of unofficial folks, like yourself. But we do have an adopt a drain program, and we will outfit you, do that.
Okay. I don't know who might know this, but within the SWOT analysis, there was a link to how Clearwater Beach seemingly has funding in place for a $70 to $100 million project to combat this issue on North Beach, and I'm just wondering, is it really funded? Do we know how they funded it?
They just finished the same master plan, so now they have a roadmap, and then how to fund it. Is it a bond? Is it gonna be taxpayers? Is it grants? And that's gonna be their roadmap to prioritize and figure it out. So yeah, they just finished what we're trying to start to get to.
It mentioned they're at the point of submitting for bids, so are they doing that without yet knowing how they're planning to pay for it, or have they identified how they plan to?
I don't know.
Okay.
I just think the whole project won't be done at once.
No, it's a decade. I think it was.
So I think they may be ready to fund, kind of similar to what we did with undergrounding and stormwater, like a portion of it,
Mhm.
right? Maybe $1 million or $2 million.
Okay.
But it's over a decade, if not more.
Yeah, I'm just trying to not reinvent the wheel. If they've already come up with a great idea on how to move forward, and we're
Yeah, I'm going to be realistic with the city commission as well, Andrew. The only way to do this is with some kind of public financing tool. Whether that's, and the special assessments, to be honest with you, I don't think are going to be enough. You're talking about, general obligation bonds, revenue bonds of some sort, because it's probably going to be in the same ballpark of hundreds of millions of dollars.
yeah, and it's, I'm sure a lot of that is front loaded because we're talking about major capital expenditures that take time to
I would say
implement.
the construction aspect, and I'll let Mike confirm this, is probably the more expensive portion, depending on what needs to be done. I always think construction's more expensive than design, but it kind of depends on what you're designing.
Okay.
But there's going to be things that we can do without spending money. Like the city commission can raise a seawall ordinance in 2 readings, right? You can amend things like that, and those things can happen at the same time.
Okay.
So.
But didn't,
Mike?
go ahead.
Stop me. Are we in the process of trying to patch up a very, very old stormwater system that, for instance, are outlets that we have that do not have check valves? The outlets go to the street drains. Those street drains are at a low point in the street because they drain water out of the streets. And those outlets and those street drains are well below where the current seawall cap is today. And if we raise the seawall cap, isn't that water going to come right straight up those drains and flood without coming over that? Like you said, water seeks its own level.
That's right.
So, I mean, the planning and everything that has been discussed here is tremendous, and it'd be great if we had a blank, I'm sure you would like to have a blank screen to just start redeveloping a brand new island that didn't even exist and put the draining in accordingly. But I don't know when the drainage was put in, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, North Beach was probably one of the oldest stormwater drainage systems there, and so the height of the caps are going to be meaningless until there's some way to stop that water to come in through the pipes. Because I can go in front of my house and look down through the drain when we have a storm, and I can tell you when it's going to flood because I watch the water come right straight up that pipe, whether it's rain or high tide or whatever. I guess to get at my real point is we're trying to fix something but are we holistically fixing it, or are we patching it, Mike? Are we throwing money at something to patch stuff? Because without building stormwater, you know, the caps are basically dikes, correct? I mean, it's going to keep the water out. And if we've got these pipes coming in that allow the water to come in, what have we really done?
I think that this is an incremental approach. We're never going to be able to go all in and put a tide check valve in every single pipe in the city, you know, in one project. We're just, unless some type of funding mechanism shows up that I'm not aware of. So we should be very focused on prioritizing where we want to place these tide check pipes or valves to prevent exactly what you described, which is the bay water flowing backwards through the pipe and up onto the street through the inlet. The cost of any one particular location were probably $15,000, $20,000 in design because we need the topographic and all kinds of other things. And then we're, $200,000 in construction. And so these are not cheap structures, but I believe that they will suffice us for a good period of time. I mean, sea level rise is not happening instantaneously tomorrow. So I think tide check valves, effectively positioned, are going to help the city extend its protection out for decades until the 2030, 40, the 2040, 2050 timeframe, when we have more information as to what Mother Nature's intents truly are. The plan that we began with, and a lot of cities did the same thing, is in the year 2020, we decided to go ahead and plan on a 30-year horizon. If somebody were to come to our city tomorrow and buy a house in the year 2020, pull a 30-year mortgage, what does their mortgage timeline look like? And so we picked 30 years. A lot of folks were doing the same thing. So 2050 is a mark on the wall for a lot of communities, 2075 and then 2100. So I think we're well served as we review our situation through the budget process every single year, because it's going to continue to build on itself. The threat, I mean.
Yeah, I agree. It's similar to building a new house where you're not allowed to have infrastructure below base flood elevation. We know every house is not going to be torn down in the next 10 years, but you have to have those requirements in place so we're getting towards the place we want to be in. I wish the seawall cap height had been a foot or two higher because I had water over my seawall last event. So if I could go back 10 years and build my seawall again, I would have gone higher. And we'll just wait for everyone to get to that point, but we can't ignore it.
Yeah.
There's some people in many, I would say most neighborhoods on St. Pete Beach that have seawater at their seawall, you know, at the top of their seawall on a reoccurring basis and not just an off event like you've experienced, because most of the neighborhoods, and I think of Bahia and Bella Vista and a lot of dances are on a routine basis. If you have a high tide and a tropical storm, the water is at the top of their seawall, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, my best guess is most of the seawalls privately owned in the city are probably around 3.5 feet.
And
3.7.
Yeah, and until you say, okay, every seawall is going to be raised and all seawall caps are going to be, at that 5-foot level, you're just causing water to go behind it, and then it has nowhere to go once it's behind that seawall. So you got to build all the seawalls, I would think, higher at one time or in stages so that you don't flood your neighbor. Your seawall's fine, but then if you raise yours, but then your next door neighbor who may not have as high a seawall, well, the water's gonna go over that way. Water seeks its own level, as Tom said.
We are having quite the conversation
Sorry.
about exactly that within the staff, and I know other cities are doing the same.
Treasure Island actually has a plan to just elevate the entire city in threefold, where they start by elevating the roads one level and then elevate all the private property and then elevate the roads again. Because Sunset Beach is experiencing that sunny day flooding, they call it, a lot worse than most of the places in St. Pete Beach. So that could be another good plan to look at and to see how they approach getting funding for that
I
project.
still don't understand how that works, because to me, if they're doing the roads first, it means it's going into all the properties, and is that their way of forcing them to make them have to go up?
They don't want
I
to do
mean-
it enough to inundate the property. It's just a little raise, and then the property's raised, and then a big raise. Once all the property's caught up, they'll raise the roads, I think, but.
I don't know,
It's a
I
long
don't
project.
know, I hear that about them
Yeah.
raising the roads first, and I'm like, okay, what's that doing to all your residents, all
Yeah.
your properties on there, so.
puts
Unless the
pressure on
water is
it.
captured and is pumped somewhere else, you're exactly right, because the water is going to the road tire, so you can drive into your neighborhood.
Right, your house is not in such good shape, though.
So would you rather have it in the yard or the house?
In the yard.
I will just tell you that that approach is not part of any recommendation that I have ever made, nor do I expect I will ever make that recommendation. It's a 100-year plan.
Well, I imagine it's not an overnight thing.
It's got some logic to it,
Yeah,
but boy, it's a challenge.
yeah.
So I don't know if we're up for that challenge.
The prospect of raising homes themselves.
I think Member Secca here is pretty much on track.
Thanks, Mike. Additional questions?
Yeah.
Member Consul, do you have additional questions, comments?
No.
Additional
I'll
comments?
summarize it and send it to everybody.
Okay.
I'll send it to Jenny and she could send it out. So you guys have it.
Thank you, Mike. Kind of put you on the spot there for a lot, so thanks. Actually, Member DeAmber, did you have any comments or questions? I kind of left you out there because you weren't sitting next to me.
Amazingly enough, no.
Okay. So does that wrap up the discussion item for coastal resiliency then?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Let's go ahead and move along to right-of-way application for marine contractors and commercial operators, please.
Just a 5-second update on this one. We brought this to you back in May, I believe, and there was not a consensus, but we talked about potentially basing the cost on number of vessels rather than just a flat permit. We looked into it. Other jurisdictions are that's how they handle it. So I think we're looking between $125 to $150 per vessel. That seems to be pretty standard among the jurisdictions that we were looking at. We just wanted to run it again by the board before we take it forward to commission.
Just out of curiosity, have you asked any of the folks that run those type of businesses? I'm sure their initial thing is, no, that's too much, but realistically, I mean, I don't want to see putting somebody out of business, and at the same time, I just want to make sure that we're getting our fair share as well, so where that equitable balance is, so
We
to
do a
speak.
similar fee structure with our BTRs, so if you have a boat slip, you pay per boat slip and how many boats are in that. So it's not against what we have, and that's kind of the cost of doing business. But we can, before it comes to commission, so they're aware and they want to come speak.
How is vessel defined?
Good point. We haven't really narrowed it down yet. Just look at, we've really just looked at what other jurisdictions have offered, but any kind of vessel engaged in a commercial, endeavor at a city boat
Yeah.
ramp or seawall.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I could imagine crafting language around a vessel being defined as something that's registered with the state, but that doesn't cover someone offloading 20 kayaks every morning at one of the boat ramps versus a marine contractor who has a single barge. And that's exactly the scenario I was envisioning having pay more. If you're monopolizing that boat ramp every morning with 90 minutes of loading vessels into the water, then you should pay more than the guy with one barge that has to put pilings on it once a month.
I believe we have it defined somewhere in our code. Because we
Oh,
we were
okay.
looking at the beach ordinance and the waterway ordinance, we were looking at that definition.
Okay.
What would the frequency of that payment be? Is that a
That's what I was just gonna
monthly,
ask.
Annual.
annual?
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, got it. That was actually what I was
Yeah.
gonna ask, so that was, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
So
think
that makes sense.
annual's
So
too-
annually, no, I don't think it's bad, but that's why I was
Does
like,
that
okay,
relate
how
to
are
how
we looking at all
frequent
that?
they
So,
plan on
yeah.
using it? You know, because some people might
Yeah, 'cause-
only drop once a week.
Right. No, it wouldn't be. I mean, other jurisdictions do have seasonal permits. I don't know that any have based, because we just don't have a way of tracking that,
Yeah.
at least not presently. Other jurisdictions have seasonal permits where it's more in the summer and spring. I don't think we've really looked into that, especially a lot of our operators, they're just year round, the marine contractors and all, so.
Also, like how many times a week they might be, or how many times a day. Because I think the fee should relate to how much time you're spending at that ramp
The
Mm.
usage.
in interfering with everyone else's usage of it. Yeah.
Understood. Take a look.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The only thing I would say, just in fairness, like every commercial operation in the city has to pay for a one-time license every year,
Yeah.
regardless of how many days you're open or the hours of operation, right? You're just paying to do business in the city, and this initiative came about because no one was granted permission to do what they were doing. So I just kind of want to put that in perspective. Like, having the permit alone is a big win for the city. It's not really the money aspect. It's kind of controlling with limitations on the permit. You violate it, we revoke it, we take you to code enforcement. Just taking more control of the usage of the boat ramp as opposed to
start the
like,
the
we're
regulation.
implementing
Yeah.
a requirement to apply for a permit,
Yeah.
which has never been done before.
How are we gonna monitor, to make sure that people are actually using them, do actually have the permit and all of that? Have we thought through any of that, or do we have any idea?
We get a lot of neighbor complaints, so. I have not. But-
People that watch.
Yeah, most of the things
Okay.
I've heard have been coming from neighbors. I'm assuming they'll continue. I haven't put any thought into it, but,
But how will they know, well, from that standpoint now, though, I'm curious, how will they know whether or not whoever they're seeing putting stuff in will have permits?
good point.
And I'm not trying to be,
We're not,
you
it's
know, I'm
not a
just trying to
huge
think through, yeah.
number.
Uh-huh.
And what we do with the BTRs, like, for example, is, like, our beach manager goes out to all the jet skis that are, read one of the hotels, they have 8 jet skis. Let me go out there and count and actually see it. She does that after those BTRs are issued. Same with the boat slips
Okay.
in some of the marinas that we have. She goes out and literally counts it. So every year, there is some, now it's a little difficult because those are sitting there, and you'd have to have some monitoring of the boat
Right.
ramp to some degree. But most businesses are early morning launchers, and we know which ones
Mhm.
go in the evening, so
With water,
not a lot of going out at noon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Would code enforcement have the ability to just do periodic cruise bys and just check
Random check.
while they're, because I know they drive around a
Mhm.
lot as it is, you know.
yeah, they could. And we, with water taxis, the way we regulate it is we have a, document flap that they just put over the side of the boat when they're operating in our jurisdiction. We could have
Yeah.
something like that, just something that
A
people could
visible license,
visually
yeah.
identify, right?
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
mhm.
Like the vehicles on the beach permits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything additional?
I did want to mention one thing, and I know it's your last meeting. It's been really fun working with you, and I appreciate your service to the city. This is one of the first boards I sat on when I first started with the city, and you were a member, and it's just been it's been really fun. No, I'm not. I'm not going to cry. I just think
I've enjoyed it. I'll
you've been a
miss
good member, and especially this last year, we've had a lot of interesting meetings here. But it's I've always appreciated your insight, so I wanted to state that. And then just wanted to float out an idea. This is the only board that meets past 2:30 besides the city commission, and I know we did that prior just because of working schedules, and I'm just kind of floating the idea again. Not that we have to, but you as a board can set your time, and we recently moved up the historic preservation board as well. So I just didn't know if you guys wanted to think about that, moving up the meeting a little bit. Just figured I'd mention it.
I would prefer not to do that.
For my workday, this time works best,
Fair enough.
I would say.
Fair enough. Okay. It would need to be a majority vote, and like City Hall closes at 4:30, so I was just thinking, what, you know, if we could, but not a problem at all.
I'm flexible.
Yeah, but if this works for the working,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
working man, yes. That's all from me.
Anybody else have anything? No? Well, thank you, everybody. I've really enjoyed my time in working with the city, so I am definitely going to miss it for sure. So, next meeting, August 19th, minus me. Meeting's adjourned.
Yes. Bang it. Bang